Hello, and welcome to the Magic of Calvin and Hobbes, a fan celebration. My name is Ryan, and I am a self-proclaimed Calvin and Hobbes superfan and expert.
And my name is also Ryan, although most people call me Indy.
Before we jump into anything with this episode, Indy, I just want to point out, you know what episode this is?
I believe this is episode 20, which would put us at halfway towards our series.
Yeah, a big milestone. This is the halfway point. That's
Yeah.
pretty crazy.
It's kind of hard to believe. Like, wow, we really gotten halfway. But that means there's still half to do, so that's fun.
Yeah, we got plenty more to come. Don't worry. So, of course, before we get into our episode, as always, we just have to make our disclaimer. We're not affiliated with Bill Watterson. We're not affiliated with his syndicate. So we don't have the rights to any of his comics. So we can't display them on our YouTube channel, but we will have a link in the show notes to a blog post where we will list all the comics that we mentioned in this episode. We'll put the dates of their original publication so you can look them up on Go Comics if you have a subscription. We'll also put the page numbers of the books they're in so you can look them up there.
Or even read them along with us as we talk about them.
Oh, yeah, that'd be fun.
Yeah.
So I thought, and I think you agreed, that for the halfway episode, we ought to hit, a really important Calvin and Hobbes topic. So it seemed like Calvinball would be a good choice.
Calvinball is better by far, as we know.
Exactly. So in this episode, we're actually going to talk about both Calvinball and all those lesser sports.
Lesser sport. Yeah, I love that subtitle, by the way. Calvin and lesser sports. That was perfection.
Yeah. So our goal is going to be to get to Calvinball because, as we all know, eventually all of Calvin and Hobbes' games turn into Calvinball. But to get there, we first have to look at some of these lesser sports.
Exactly.
So many elements of these sports are going to show up in Calvinball. So let's take a look at those.
Yeah.
So Calvin and Hobbes play a few sports together, just the two of them sometimes, or sometimes even just Calvin. So here's my best attempt at ordering them from least to most prominent. So we'll start with basketball. Now, there are maybe a couple allusions to basketball in Calvin and Hobbes, though I couldn't find or think of any where Calvin is really playing basketball. So extra bonus points if you can think of them. I will admit, if the tables were turned, this was completely off my radar, and if I hadn't gone through my books looking for sports strips, I wouldn't have noticed this. But if you can think of any strips where basketball is alluded to, bonus points to you.
Yeah, it's funny because when you mentioned that, I was thinking, yeah, that's weird. Now that I think about it, I can't really think of anywhere basketball was named, which is kind of strange because given how popular and prominent a sport basketball is in general, you would almost expect that more than some less common ones like croquet and things, which we do see on multiple occasions. So that being said, I am not at all confident that this is right, but if I have to guess, there's one where Calvin's going to be going to play baseball at recess. And then Hobbes asks whether he knows the rules. He says something like, yes, another thing, am I allowed to do this or not? And he makes a reference to some other sports when asking that question. So maybe basketball gets sort of alluded to there.
Okay. Yeah, I'll just say that one actually is a football reference.
So that's not one. My other guess where it might have been was another one we'll talk about later that you referred to a second ago, where we start off playing football and then eventually it turns into Calvinball. And I thought maybe there's some kind of reference to basketball or a basketball player during that whole progression.
Yeah, I don't think there is. I'd have to go back and double check. Those weren't the ones I came up with, but I will say again, this was like a super deep cut. Like I never would have gotten there if I hadn't been looking through my books. So the ones that I found were both involving Mo. So there's the Mo strip where Calvin refers to fifth period studies in contemporary state-sponsored terrorism, also known as gym class. Calvin is holding what appears to be a basketball when Mo comes up and threatens him. And then similarly, Mo comes up and has some sort of altercation with Calvin, and Calvin says people who get nostalgic about childhood were obviously never children. I believe that's one where Mo says, "Let's have the ball, Twinkie or Squirt or whatever he calls him."
Yeah.
And Calvin's like, "Here, Mo, all yours." I think it's a basketball. So, I mean, calling these allusions to basketball is even a bit of a stretch because it might not even be a basketball that he's holding. It just kind of looks like one. So,
Okay. All right. So possibly there's two strips where he's holding a basketball.
yeah, and that's about as close as I can get, unless there is some reference to basketball in one of the strips you mentioned or something
Okay.
that I'm
I
forgetting. But
Yeah, I kind of don't think there is. Like I said, those are just sort of my best stabs at where these might be. Because yeah, that is a very deep cut. That's a really good trivia question, actually. So
yeah,
yeah,
so
that was kind of a like a fun fun
yeah,
fact, non-fact. I don't know what to call it. Fun something, but yeah,
fun piece of
question.
possible information or something. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, But yeah. So basketball kind of shows up, but the first one that I would say definitely shows up without being super prominent is lacrosse, which is not played by Calvin, but Susie seems to play it. So, Calvin throws a pine cone at her and she zings it back at him, and then you see her walking off with her lacrosse stick.
Yeah,
So,
which raises the point that Calvin must have seen that she was carrying it and even wearing a uniform, I think. So, I mean, gutsy move, like to do that exact moment to try to wing the pine cone at her.
yeah, I don't know what he was thinking, but well, I think we can probably rest pretty assured that he wasn't really thinking.
That's true.
Uh,
Just
yeah.
instinct took over to get rid of a slimy girl. So,
Slimy girl, pine cone, got to do it. Yeah.
yeah, that's A plus B equals C, I guess.
Right. But now we can start to get into ones that we actually see Calvin play. So there's soccer, and I think Calvin only tries this one once. So he's explaining to Hobbs the rules of soccer. You can use any part of your body except your hands or arms, even your head. And then Hobbs goes, "Yeah, but your face? Doesn't that hurt?"
Ah, that's not what I meant to do.
And he's clutching his face.
Yeah, and the thing I love about this strip is that Hobbs is being completely sincere. It's not some sarcastic comment like, "Oh, you really want to use your face?" He looks actually confused, like, "Huh? Wow, I wouldn't think people would want to use their face like that. That looks painful."
I mean, okay, if you feel like that's the right play, whatever.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
don't think this game sounds very fun.
Yeah, it reminds me of a time. So one time I was working with some teenagers, and there was a platform. It wasn't like it was a stage basically, but
Okay.
this kid was like, "Hey everyone, this is how you do a box jump." And so he tries
Oh.
to jump up onto the stage and smacks both of his shins into the corner. Uh,
Hmm.
I mean, smacking your shins like that hurts like crazy,
Oh
but
yeah, weirdly so. Yeah.
yeah, but in retrospect, it's something that you can kind of laugh at and go, because he's like, "This is how you do a box jump." Oh, okay. Well, in that case, I don't ever want to do a box jump.
Yeah. Remind me not to try that.
Yeah,
God, poor
but
kid.
yeah, no, it was not good. He was in a lot of pain. This is the sort of thing that you laugh at in retrospect.
Yeah, yeah. After the excruciating agony and injury, then you can laugh at it.
Yeah. So next up on the list, we've got volleyball. And again, I can only think of one instance where we actually see them playing volleyball proper, if you want to call it that. There's
Hmm.
instances where a volleyball is used. It's commonly the Calvin ball, but
Yeah, I think a soccer ball in one case might be the
yeah,
Calvin ball too, but I think you're right. Other than that, these are the only instances where we see those sports being played.
yeah. So there's one time where they seem to be playing volleyball by the actual rules. Calvin hits it, and the sound effect is bop, and then Hobbs goes spike, and it turns out that the joke is they're on a tennis court, so it's a much
Hmm.
lower net, and they have to leave because some big people want to play tennis.
Yeah, which to be fair, it'd be kind of hard for a little kid to play on a full size, so I don't really
Yeah, I
blame
think
him.
that's a good solution. That's a good place for a 6-year-old to try volleyball.
Yeah. Now this wasn't because we couldn't use a full size one, but in a semi-related note, I remember when I was a kid at our church, there was a like daycare or school for much younger children sort of attached to it. And there would be a playground there that we would go play on sometimes after church on Sunday. But then eventually we saw, oh, they're putting in a basketball hoop. Okay, that's cool. But as it turned out, they made the hoop to be a much lower height because, it was for little kids. But that meant for us who were slightly older kids, we could just about dunk it. So
Nice.
Yeah, this was like the best thing ever. We're like, we're in the NBA now. Look at us. Like, yeah. So we had a lot of fun with that low basketball hoop.
Yeah, I remember when I was a kid, we had a hoop that was adjustable sitting in our front yard, on the
Okay.
driveway. And so we would lower it down to like 7 feet or something. And so we could dunk on that. And it felt so cool.
I know, right? It's like, man, that's
Yeah.
that's like the best feeling, especially for a
Yeah.
kid. Like,
Right. Yeah. You feel like you're a basketball star.
yeah.
Okay, so next up we've got golf, and there are a couple instances of this one. So there's one strip with just Calvin where he whacks the golf ball and then he walks over to this giant hole that he presumably dug because there's a shovel sitting right next to it. And he says, "Wow, another hole in one."
Which it's almost more impressive that he could dig such a big hole because that is
Right?
not easy.
Yeah, anyone who's read the book Holes knows that.
Okay, yeah, that's I actually haven't read that book, but I can believe it. Like just that's anyone I haven't read that book, but I have dug holes from time to time, and yeah, that it seems like the kind of thing that would be much simpler than it is.
Yeah. Well, I'll just say that, that book, the idea is this kid gets sent to a correctional facility and their punishment is every day they have to dig a 5 foot deep hole. So,
Huh.
this is a punishment.
Yeah, that makes sense. That doesn't sound fun.
Right. And then coming back to golf, there's a Sunday strip where Calvin and Hobbs are playing golf together, but it really seems to be more of a mashup of golf and hockey or something because they're hitting the ball back and forth and like, chasing each other, and Calvin grabs Hobbs' tail and stuff. And they're noting that if you don't want to play with old geezers, you have to make golf a contact sport.
Which does look pretty fun, honestly. Now, I from time to time had my own ideas of how to make like maybe combat golf, if you want to call it that. So I don't
Okay.
know. Do you ever think of anything like that yourself?
Well, not combat golf, but when I was in high school, my friends and I made up kung football, which
Ooh,
is football, but instead of tackling each other, you use, kung fu martial arts moves on your opponent to take them down.
that sounds kind of awesome and something teachers and parents alike would be horrified by.
Exactly.
Nice. All right, so I like that idea. So my idea for spicing up golf would be like sort of like this. So the basic part of the game is the same. So you're lined up and you're trying to make your shot, but while you're trying to hit your golf shot, there's like people on another team or something with maybe some kind of like tennis ball cannon or something. Like if you ever watch
Ah,
American Gladiators, like they had in
uh-huh.
that. And so then you'd have other guys, like maybe your caddies, who would have shields and they'd have to like try to position themselves to protect the person hitting the ball from the incoming artillery fire. So you're like trying to hit it, but also trying to make sure you don't get tagged by the ball that's coming at you. So I don't
I
know. I
like
think
it.
that sounds pretty cool.
Yeah, I think somebody needs to develop that into a league.
Yeah, I bet that would get even better viewership than normal golf.
Yeah, I mean, I'd watch it.
So yeah, so I think Calvin's kind of on the right track here. That looks like a fun way to play golf, honestly.
Actually, just since we're on that note, I will say when I was getting ready to propose to my wife, I called her dad to ask for, her hand, all the traditional
Wow.
stuff.
Very
Yeah,
traditional, yes.
it was, yeah. But she liked it, but so I called him and he asked me several questions. He was just messing with me, but one of the things he asked was, "So do you play golf?" And I said, "No, not really." And and then he asked some other stuff about like his interests, and then he said, "Well," because I said no to like all of the things. And he said, "Well, I don't know what she sees in you, but if you make her happy."
That's really funny, actually.
Yeah, I mean that's just how he is. And I knew he was messing with me. It was all in good fun, but
Yeah.
that was a fun story.
Yeah, that is a fun story. And
Yeah,
congratulations again. I mean, several years
yeah.
after the fact, but
Well, yeah, a couple of years in, I guess.
yeah, you've been married for a long time, got kids, but yeah, congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. All right, next, kind of similar to golf, we've got croquet that you mentioned. So Calvin and Hobbes play croquet a few times, and I would say though that what they do is maybe only loosely described as croquet because in the first Sunday stripper we see it, Hobbes is setting up the wickets, and Calvin accuses him of putting them too far apart because Hobbes can hit the ball harder.
Right, and then I'll add, Hobbes is like, "No, this is how far apart they're supposed to be. I'm just doing it the way it's supposed to be."
Right, yeah. And Calvin's like, no, it's not, you cheater. You're just doing that because you can hit the ball harder than I can. And Hobbs
Right.
is like, well, who's a cheater? Who took the lucky red ball when I wasn't looking? And
I got the
well,
pick
that
first, you picked first last time.
that's a lie. You always take the lucky red ball first. And so it devolves into this whole physical fight. And then mom comes and calls them in because it's getting late. And Calvin says, "Ah, mom, we're right in the middle of a croquet game." So that's their version of croquet. I don't think a single stroke of actual croquet occurred.
That's true. So, I mean, it sounds like the intention was maybe to play it more or less the correct way, but yeah,
Right.
they don't actually get anything done there. It reminds me of another strip where I don't think this was croquet. It might have been another game, but anyway, it's the one we've mentioned before where it devolves into an insult match. Like, oh, this is you, duh, duh, duh. Well, you go like this, go, that kind of stuff. And
Yeah.
then they get called in again. It's like, well, leave it to mom to interrupt our witty repartee.
Yeah. I I can't remember. I don't think they were playing a sport in that one. I think they were just talking and like, you know,
Yeah,
something about like how great they are and well, but little boys you can hardly take in public. What do you mean? I may be mixing that up, but it might have been that one.
yeah. But anyway,
But
kind of
anyway,
a similar thing where they're doing big, important, official things, but mom interrupts it and calls them in. So
yeah, yeah. Oh, mom, yeah. And then there's another one where they're playing croquet, sort of, but Hobbs rolls the ball to Calvin like you would if you were playing skee ball at an arcade or something, and it's a pitch. So
yeah,
it's like croquet and baseball had a baby.
yeah. Which again, that looks like a really fun way to play because he hits it and then runs, and then the wickets are kind of in a like a swirly line, so not straight. So you have to run over all of them. It looks like to touch the goalpost. So yeah, like
Yeah,
again, I enjoy normal croquet fine, I guess, but that looks like a fun variant also.
yeah, I think that'd be way more fun than regular croquet. Okay, I'll admit I've never played regular croquet, so maybe I would
Okay.
like it, but I feel like the version where you hit the pitch and run across the wickets and touch the pole. That's maybe it's more like saying croquet and cricket had a baby because cricket you actually do run from like kind of pole to pole, right?
I don't really know, but I will trust you on this one.
I'm not an expert on cricket.
I,
Listeners, if
I
you know how to
mean,
play cricket and you want to correct us, feel free.
yeah, yeah. So I was actually going to ask you after this if you had played croquet growing up, because I remember my family did from time to time, like when I was, not super young, but fairly young, and we'd go out and set up. So it was fun. I think the old croquet set is still in the garage, and we haven't played it in a long time, but.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
so I was
I
gonna say
think I had a
games
friend.
are kind of relatable a little bit. Like, oh yeah, I remember going out and playing croquet with my family. So
Yeah, I think I had a friend down the street whose family had a croquet set, and we may have set it up once, but I don't think we were playing the right way if we played at all.
okay,
So
well, like
yeah.
we said, Calvin's way seems like a blast too. So either way you want to play it.
Yeah, and I like that Hobbs is chasing Calvin with the croquet ball, saying, "You missed a wicket, no goal, no goal." And Calvin says their favorite games are the ones they don't understand, which reminds me of something that my sister and I did when we were kids. So this isn't a sport, but my family had a backgammon set, and we had no idea how to play backgammon. So we
Okay,
just made up our own version. I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was something where you roll the dice, and then if you get this number, you can place a tile on this triangle or whatever, and
okay,
you're trying to fill up your triangles or something. So
it seems
we didn't,
reasonable.
yeah, we didn't know how to play backgammon, but we figured out a game that we could play. So it worked.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
still
and
don't know how to play backgammon actually.
yeah, I was gonna say for me, I think backgammon is a game that I have learned how to play on various occasions, but it happens so seldom that then I forget again. So
Yeah.
and maybe that'll happen again sometime.
And then there's one other time that I can think of with Calvin and Hobbes and playing croquet specifically rather than using the croquet equipment for something else. And so this is one of those bonus drawings in one of the earlier books, probably either Calvin and Hobbes or something under the bed is drooling, where Calvin is getting ready to take his shot. It's his turn, but Hobbes is using his mallet to make like a rut in the grass
Mhm.
that curves away from the wicket. So it's going from where Calvin's ball is, curving away from the wicket, so that his shot will curve, and Calvin is yelling at him.
Yeah, which understandably so. That doesn't seem very sporting. Yeah, it
No,
strikes me that this you might call this like anti-curling. So
yeah,
instead of trying to like use a broom to guide the puck or whatever it's called, like in the right direction, you're using your mallet to guide the ball in the wrong direction to mess up your opponent.
that could be a fun addition to curling if the other team was allowed to, like, I don't know, shovel snow in the path of the block or
Yeah.
whatever.
Or like if you had guys with a tennis ball cannon and you needed
Yeah,
shields, we're just
there
gonna
you
add that
go.
to every sport now.
I like it. Yeah, every sport needs to have that. Even tennis, we just you're playing tennis and we have the tennis ball cannons.
Ooh, in that case, you wouldn't have to have shields. You could have like other teammates with rackets of their own, and their job would just be to like defend against the other tennis balls and knock them back away.
Yeah, and like maybe you're the main player is trying to hit the lucky red tennis ball.
Oh yeah, like if you ever see maybe 3-point contests for basketball, they'll have the different
Uh,
ones. Like, oh, that's the money ball. It's worth more points. So we could have things like that for the tennis
yeah,
ball too.
look at us making up new sports. This is great.
Yeah, yeah. This we could have a whole league of like enhanced sports. Maybe we'll call them
That's what we'll call it. Yeah, I like it.
enhanced sports league (ESL).
There you go. Yeah. So that's the kind of the less prominent sports that we see in Calvin and Hobbes. Much more prominently, Calvin and Hobbes play football. So
Yes.
curiously, I don't think we ever see a football itself in Calvinball, although, as we've alluded to, there is a football game that becomes the catalyst for Calvinball in one case. So we'll get to that in a minute. But there are a lot of football strips. So the first one I could find was from August 24th, 1986, a little ways into the strips run. This is a Sunday strip with the throwaway joke where Calvin says, "Hey, Hobbes, want to toss the old pigskin around?" And Hobbes says, "Heck no." And Calvin walks away with an actual pigskin saying, "Phooey,"
Yeah.
which I like that throwaway joke. I think it's funny. But the,
Very visual gag.
yeah, the rest of the strip is the one where Calvin and Hobbes start arguing over who gets to make the touchdown. So like, I think it's Hobbes snaps the ball to Calvin, and then Calvin passes to Hobbes, and Hobbes is like, "He's at the 30, the 20, the 10." And then Calvin says, "But he's tackled from behind and laterals to Calvin so he can make the touchdown." And
Yeah,
well, but
but
there's a
Calvin
penalty.
fumbles the ball and Hobbs recovers it, and
Yeah, there's a penalty called on the play, and Hobbes defects to the other team, and you know Calvin prepares to cripple the traitor with an illegal face mask pull. Well, Hobbes pours his mouth guard out onto Calvin's helmet, and Hobbes is blowing a raspberry at him. And then at
yeah,
the end, we see Hobbes's team gains a yard. All the cheerleaders come out for smooches.
yeah, which I always thought was really funny. It's like, oh wow, first of all, we gained a single yard. Okay. And then like all the cheerleaders are so thrilled by this, they come out for smooches, which maybe isn't the most PC thing to say, but it is kind of funny.
You're right.
Yeah. So also speaking of cheerleaders and I guess our enhanced sports, sometimes I think, what if they played more of an active role in football games?
What if, and hear me out on this, the
Okay.
cheerleaders had tennis ball cannons?
Yes. All right. So we get 10 ball cannons. Okay. So that's always a good idea. But even aside from that, what if there was like you'd have points during the game where we had so a few ideas. So one, a play where the cheerleaders run onto the field. Now they're additional receivers. So that's
Hmm.
one. Yeah. Now the only bad thing is that might be a little dangerous. We might have to have them wear pads at least if we're doing that.
Yeah, that would make them look less cheerleadery, but I think we can live with that.
Okay. Then I also thought maybe in a more traditional sense, there could be points in the game where we have like cheerleader dance off, and then whichever side wins, like that team gets an additional timeout or something.
Oh, okay, okay, I like it.
Yeah. Then
But
have you ever seen the movie The Replacements?
no, I'm not familiar.
Okay, so this is a movie about it's about a football team, but it's like there's some kind of strike or dispute, and a bunch of the normal players, refuse to play. So then they get these like kind of regular guys to come in and play, and so then it's like,
Mm,
oh, they're the underdog that we're rooting for because they're so likable, and the real players are being jerks, that kind of thing. So,
right.
but anyway, there's a thing in there where like the cheerleaders for that team like do something to distract the other team, and it actually helps the replacement guys win this one game or something. So that sort
Okay.
of thing could be a good use for cheerleaders also.
Right. Okay. So yeah, we've got some good ideas, but I think tennis ball cannons have got to be
Tennis
the
ball
main thing.
cannons are the best, though, it turns.
Yeah. Now, continuing with football, there are some strips where Hobbs kicks off to Calvin, inevitably ending with Calvin getting creamed. So
Mhm.
there's a Sunday strip that starts with a throwaway joke where Hobbs is like, "Go way back. I'm really gonna belt this. No, farther, way back." And Calvin's standing there with binoculars, and he's like, "That dummy, he can't kick it this far." But so then Hobbs kicks off, Calvin catches it and is running, and he runs right past Hobbs, and Hobbs is just standing there watching him. And then Calvin comes to a screeching halt and looks back and is like, "Aren't you gonna try to tackle me? Geez, I could crawl on my hands and knees from here and make it to the end zone before you." He realizes that was a mistake. And then
Yeah,
Hobbs
it sounds
slams
like he
into him.
almost makes it.
Yeah. Yeah, because he's like, he realizes Hobbs is coming for him and he starts running his little legs off, and Hobbs slams into him. And then in the last battle, Hobbs is like, "Do you want to try for the remaining yard or just give me the ball now?"
Yeah, he actually gets 1 yard away, it sounds like.
Yeah. And I think that's the one where Calvin says, "I call a 10-year timeout to grow some more."
Yeah,
And
which
then,
reasonable. And the
yeah,
other thing is, I think given that Hobbs was coming from the other side, he must have tackled him towards the goal too. So
right.
he actually got assisted by the force of the tackle, but it still wasn't enough to get there.
Not quite. Hobbs was taking a risk. He might have knocked Calvin over the goal line.
That's true. So yeah, but extra demoralizing for Calvin, I guess.
Yeah. But then there's another one where Hobbs kicks it off to Calvin and then just actually, attempts to tackle him right from the offset and hits him so hard that he says, "I'll bet it takes you 4 downs just to get back on the field." And Calvin says he thinks football is a sport the same way ducks think hunting is a sport.
Yeah, which actually brings up an interesting point. So, like you mentioned, the football strips are by far the most common of the sort of regular sports ones. And so, even though this always goes very poorly for Calvin and he talks about how much he hates it, it seems like he actually really likes it. Otherwise, why would he be playing it so much?
Yeah. Now, I'm actually going to go ahead and throw out there on that note. When I was a kid, my brother and I would play football in the backyard. Now, my brother is 6 years older than me. So,
Okay.
we're talking like a 8-year-old and a 14-year-old playing football, or a 10-year-old and 16, and
Which does seem a
obviously
little lopsided.
a little lopsided, right? So I didn't stand a chance. Now he was nice. He would give me handicaps and stuff so that I could maybe have a chance at winning. But here's the thing. He didn't care about winning. He cared about tackling me. Like,
Oh,
this was not
no.
about coming off victorious for him. So, and I
Well,
didn't
he was a
realize
lot
this.
like
I just
Hobbs.
Yeah, so it was like he was Hobbs and I was Calvin. And
Yeah.
he just wanted to tackle me. He even came up with a game called Grass Burn.
Oh,
So
no.
I think the
I
title
want to
gives
play
you
that
all the
game.
information you really need there.
Yeah. Yeah, I read
So
that was using your face in soccer, probably.
right. Now, curiously, he won't play Grassburn with me anymore. I've grown a little since then.
Caught
So
up a bit.
yeah. But
Yeah.
yeah, so that was our relationship when I was a kid. Now, lest anyone get the wrong idea, my brother and I are very good friends. So, no animosity. This was when we were kids. He just liked to tackle his little brother because that's what you do when you're an older brother.
Apparently. Yeah. So I guess all these football strips of Calvin and Hobbes were especially relatable for you then.
Right. Yeah.
This
Well,
this is
and
my experience here.
yeah, it was like Watterson was speaking directly to me. Maybe that's why I like Calvin and Hobbes so much. um, but then there are some where Calvin kicks off to Hobbes and tries to tackle him with no success. So there's one where Calvin slams into him and he's like, crawling around on Hobbs, who's just kind of looking at Calvin. And Calvin says, "Let's change this to touch football, okay?"
Isn't that
Or
the one where Hobbs just kind of, I get, for lack of a better word, nonchalantly, like he just walks, basically carrying Calvin, who's trying to tackle him. He just holds the ball up and eventually just gets to the end zone.
yeah, pretty much. And
Yeah.
there's another one like that where basically the same thing is happening, and Calvin says, "Let's play something else." And then another one very similar again, where Calvin is, slams into Hobbs. This one's a Sunday strip, and if I'm remembering the art right, it's done where you see Calvin's arms extending way farther past Hobbs. It's cartoonishly farther, while his face is getting like crumpled in. So clearly Hobbs didn't budge an inch. And
No.
then, Calvin is like grabbing Hobbs's leg and stuff. And ultimately at the end, we see them playing, I think, checkers or maybe chess. And Calvin has said he's decided to be an intellectual.
Yeah, probably chess. I think that has more of the intellectual vibe than checkers.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah, I mean they
And
do play
then one,
checkers on other occasions, but
that's true. They've played both, so it could be either. And then there's one other where Calvin kicks off. This doesn't involve tackling, but Calvin kicks the ball and it goes backwards over his head, spinning end over end. And Hobbs is there ready to catch it. And so Hobbs says, "Okay, that's how we'll do kickoffs from now on." And Calvin's like, "Well, go with what works, I guess."
yeah, and this is one of those strips where I feel like the art really sells it. So it is kind of a little thing, I guess, compared to a lot of the strips or the ones you might think of as like, oh, the amazing art. But I always thought like Calvin's shrugging expression at the end was really evocative. Like I feel like I can feel exactly what he's feeling and hear exactly the way he's saying his line there.
Yeah, yeah. He has like his hands in his pockets and
Yeah,
kind of
while
shoulders
shrugging.
kind of.
Yeah, so that's, I don't know. Again, it's kind of maybe a weird choice to pick out as like a really great example of art, but I think this is a, a really a really evocative scene that really displays Watterson's way with art to get characters' emotions across.
Yeah, no, he's really good at that. Now, continuing with football, there's various ones that instead of a kickoff involve someone already having the ball and hiking or snapping the ball. And so there's a daily strip where Hobbs snaps the ball to Calvin, then immediately turns around and tackles him. And so then they're in this pile, and Calvin's like, "We've got to get some other players."
That's true. You need an offensive line in that case.
Or one Mississippi or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah.
On a similar note, there's one where Calvin snaps the ball to Hobbs, and then Hobbs throws the ball to Calvin, but then runs so fast that he passes Calvin before Calvin catches the ball and then turns around and tackles him. And so the punchline is it's unclear whose team Hobbs was on when he recovered the fumble, but Calvin says it doesn't matter because the game has been called due to sudden death.
Yes.
Then there's one where Calvin has the ball, he's running with it, and then Hobbs is coming, and Calvin kind of squirts the ball up into the air, like under his armpit or something. And
Yeah,
Hobbs,
I always got the impression he was sort of like ducking and throwing it up so then Hobbs could just like
yeah,
grab the ball instead of tackling him.
right. And so, Hobbs runs off with it, and Calvin says, "They say winning isn't everything, and I've decided to take their word for it."
You know, but true.
Yeah. And on a similar note, there's one where Calvin has the ball and he says, "Hike," and then he goes, "Whoops," and purposely fumbles. So Hobbs picks the ball up and runs off with it. And Calvin says, "I'm losing the game, but winning an ambulatory adulthood." So, we're not going to go through every football strip because there's a lot of them, but this is the general vibe that we get when they're playing normal backyard football, so to speak.
Right. Either Calvin gets obliterated or he just kind of gives up from the outset.
Right. Yeah. But there are also some tricky ways to play football that are going to start to get us closer to our goal of Calvinball. So there's one where Hobbs is running and then he kind of deviates and goes through the house to get away from Calvin. And Calvin's chasing after him, going, "This isn't how you play the game." And Hobbs has this delighted expression on his face.
It doesn't even like go underneath the armchair and out the other side and that
Yeah,
kind of
I think that's right. Yeah. So, um, which we'll get to baseball in a minute, but it also reminds me of one where Calvin is chasing Hobbs down with the ball, with the baseball to tag him, and then Hobbs deviates and Calvin's like, you have to stay in the baseline. And Hobbs is like, yeah, prove it. So, if we'd had a first baseman, you'd have been out long ago. Well, we don't, do we? So that sort of thing. But we'll talk more about baseball in a second. But Calvin, so, Calvin at first is opposed to this idea of Hobbs deviating from the normal way to play football. But then in a later strip, we see Calvin saying to Hobbs, "Have you seen the ball anywhere? I don't see it." And Hobbs is like, "I don't know." And Calvin's like, "Well, you look over there, and I'll look this way." And then we see this lump in Calvin's shirt, and he's running towards the side that he was saying, and then Hobbs is chasing after him. So obviously the football is in Calvin's shirt, and Calvin's saying, "It doesn't matter whether you win or lose; it's how you play the game."
Yeah, this is one of the few times where Calvin seems to actually get one over on Hobbs. Like he might have actually scored there.
Yeah, yeah, it's a rare instance. It occasionally happens.
Hmm.
There's another one where Calvin is holding the football and he's ringing Susie's doorbell and no one's coming. He's like, come on, answer the door. What's wrong with you people? Don't you answer your door? And then Hobbs is piled on top of Calvin. We see him as the stuffed version of Hobbs. And Susie's like, my mom says our doorbell is not a toy. Go away, And
Yeah,
uh,
which I always wondered too, like what like Susie doesn't seem surprised that it was Calvin ringing the doorbell, but then she also doesn't seem surprised that he's like collapsed in a heap underneath Hobbs. And I kind of wonder what's going through her mind at that point.
yeah, if I had to guess, it'd be like, well, there's Calvin at it again. Because she's seen this sort of thing before.
That's
I don't know
true.
what's weirder, the fact that you're fighting with a stuffed animal or that you seem to be losing.
Yeah,
That
I'm
sort of
not
thing.
losing. This guy cheats. So
Yeah, hey, no biting.
yeah, but no, that does make sense. She has seen this on more than one occasion, but I don't know. I always felt like, well, does she even want to? I guess she doesn't want to know what's going on. So
Yeah,
whatever. One more thing where Calvin's being weird with Hobbs. So
yep. But then there's one where Calvin really seems to take Hobbes's idea to heart. He's running all over the place. He's crossing through a creek. He's going through some fence slats, hiding in the sandbox, like under the sand. And he even hides in the mailbox. And so then, as Hobbes is chasing him, Calvin says, "We think every sport should be played cross country," which I feel like is a very Calvinball feel.
yeah, it really is. It also sort of reminds me when they play capture the flag or something similar a few times, which also
Yeah,
with that seemed to make it into Calvin ball. So
yeah, that's true. So we didn't mention capture the flag in our list of other lesser sports, but that's something that they also play occasionally. I also like the one where Calvin is wading through tall grass and crossing a creek
mhm.
and whatever, and then he climbs a tree, grabs a flag, exchanges flags, comes back down and goes back through all that stuff again. And then Hobbs says, "Time, that was 10 minutes and 15 seconds or whatever. That's our best time yet." And then Hobbs goes off to do the same thing, and Calvin says, "Weekends don't count unless you spend them doing something completely pointless."
Yeah. Yeah, so
Yeah,
that's
that sort of
it's
feel.
not capture the flag, but it has similar elements in it, and it is cross country like this one.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, which also, I mean, I don't know that's any more pointless than some sports or sport like activities. So that's kind of cool actually.
Yeah, I mean, you could definitely make the argument that every sport doesn't actually matter. So, it's not any worse than playing any other sport.
Yeah, which sometimes I wonder if like part of the appeal of sports is that it's something that we know doesn't really matter, and so then we can treat it like it matters, but we know there's not really any stakes. I don't know if that
Yeah.
makes sense, but it's sort of like, you have real issues that, deserve a lot of time and that, it makes a difference how they turn out. But with sports, we can be like, oh yeah, I'm really invested in my team winning and I put energy in this, but part of the appeal is I know that really it doesn't matter though. So
Yeah,
I
if
don't know,
they
it's sort of
don't
an outlet.
win, I'll I'm disappointed they didn't win, but really it's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So I wonder
Now,
if it's sort of like an emotional catharsis of some kind, our investment in sports.
yeah, because I don't mean to give off the vibe of like, oh, I hate sports ball. I enjoy
Oh
sports.
no.
I'm not a big fanatic or anything, but I think sports are fun. So, I'm not trying to say anything like that. Just if you think about it, sports don't really matter in and of themselves.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's the same here. Like I enjoy playing sports. I like watching at least some of them. So yeah, but it can be fun to have camaraderie of all cheering for a certain team or maybe against a certain team, even though like at the end of the day, like okay, but not
Yeah.
gonna lose a lot of sleep over it.
Right. Yeah. Now, we got to talk about one more football strip because this one actually is directly related to Calvinball. So, this is incidentally the last football strip and the last Calvinball strip. This is from September 24th, 1995. And it starts with, I believe, Hobbs saying, "The center snaps the ball." And Calvin says, "No, he doesn't. He doesn't. No, he's secretly a traitor. He's playing for the other team." And well, so Calvin breaks for the goal. Nobody can catch him. Well, they don't want to. You're running towards your own goal. Wait, what do you mean? When I learned you were a traitor, I switched goals, and so yours is over there and mine's hidden. They have this whole back and forth. Well, I don't need to know where your goal is because I'm a traitor, so crossing your goal is really crossing my goal. Oh, just
And I think
great stuff. And
Hobbs like hides his goal directly on top of Calvin's goal too, is where it's
yeah, so you'll
secretly.
lose points. Yeah. Well, but then it ends with, well, that would be true if I were a football player. You
You mean
mean no, I'm actually a badminton player disguised as a double agent football player. And Hobbs is like, well, I'm secretly a volleyball, croquet, polo player. So then, then we get the line, sooner or later, all our games turn into Calvinball.
Yeah, and I just love the progression here is with all the build up back and forth because this sounds exactly like the kind of things imaginative kids come up with. I mean, not only just for sports, but it's like, I don't know, you're playing pretend or whatever. It's like, oh, but blah blah blah. Yeah, but this, and you didn't know. Oh, well then how about this? And then so I don't know, I can
Yeah.
remember things like in that ballpark, at least, no pun intended, doing like with friends of mine when we were running around outside. So
Yeah, well, there's another strip like that where Calvin and Hobbs are playing tag, and Calvin calls timeout, and Hobbs is like, "Time in tag." No, we have to say it together. You're making up the rules. And so, and I
yeah.
remember doing very much that sort of thing as a kid. This is base. No, it's not. You can't puppy guard on all that sort of stuff.
Oh, for sure. And I have to say, in the one you just mentioned, I think Calvin is completely in the right there. Like,
Oh yeah,
it,
Hobbs is absolutely cheating.
oh yeah, for sure. Like, and it's maybe it's not spoken, but it's certainly an unspoken rule that like when you're discussing rules, that's time out when you have to say time in together and agree. Like, it's like, come on now, Hobbs, you know
Yeah,
better.
yeah, but well, he knows better. He just doesn't care.
That could be it. Yeah.
Yeah. So that football strip actually involves Calvinball directly. We're not quite ready to get into Calvinball just yet because also very prominently, I think maybe even more prominent than football is baseball in Calvin and Hobbes. They play
Possible.
it a
Those are
lot.
definitely the top two.
Yeah, I didn't count, so I don't actually know which one comes up more, but those are the two they play the most for sure. And interestingly, again, baseball itself doesn't seem to show up in Calvinball, but it's very important in a couple of ways, as we'll see. So, they don't use a baseball or a bat or a glove in Calvinball, but we will still get to Calvinball from this. So, the first instance of baseball is from March of 1986. And this is Calvin by himself. He throws it up in the air and hits it, as you do when you're a kid and you're playing baseball by yourself. And then we hear smash, tinkle, ding, shatter, clink. And Calvin says, wow, first try. Incidentally, that's not the only one where he breaks a window. Do you remember the other one?
Yeah, so I think there's one where this happens and he hands Susie the bat and it's trying
Yeah.
to you see her kind of like pushing her along and it's like just run up to my door, ring the doorbell and say ha ha. She's like, why is that worth 25 cents to you?
Yeah. Yeah. But then there's another one where Calvin's playing by himself and he's like, Calvin steps up to bat and the outfield heads for the bleachers. It's sure to be another homer, folks. And he throws the ball in the air and it bonks him in the head. Not surprisingly, the pitcher decides to walk Calvin. And then there are a couple that I find really impressive on Calvin's part. He throws the ball up, hits it, then switches from the bat to his glove in time to catch the ball. I did it. I caught it. I'm out. And
Yeah.
another one very similar to that, where he hits the ball, switches to the glove, catches it, goes out. then takes the glove off, picks the bat back up, and says, "Darn."
Yeah, I really like both of those. So I agree, very impressive to be able to do that, hit it and then catch your own pitch and then hit, sorry. And then yeah, the other one I just like too because it's almost like he built off of that and realized it was fun or that he liked it. So but now he's having to act out both roles. So I get a kick out of that one.
Yeah. But setting those aside, there are some strips where Calvin and Hobbes play quote unquote normal baseball, sort of. So there's one where Calvin hits the ball, Hobbes fields the grounder, throws it to Calvin at first, who now has his glove on and catches it, and then he throws it back to Hobbes, who's I guess at second, and Hobbes says, "Nice double play. Who's out? I don't know. Are you on my team or am I on your team?" So again, they don't have enough players. There's one where Hobbes hits the ball straight up in the air, really high. And so Calvin's like, I went straight up. This is going to be so easy to catch. And Hobbes is just standing there. So Calvin's like, I see you're not even going to run. I don't blame you. You're as good as out. And then as the ball comes down, Hobbes puts his bat out, and we see the ball go pink. And Calvin is just beet red, yelling at Hobbes, "You can't do that!" And Hobbes is like, "That's 2 hits on 1 pitch. This run counts double."
Which makes a certain amount of sense, right? Like
Yeah,
twice, so you should get 2 runs.
absolutely. Yeah, why not?
Yeah, no, I
The,
feel like in real baseball that wouldn't count. But if someone ever did that, like they hit it up and then just like hit it again when it came down, okay, first of all, they'd probably get ejected from the game, but it would be awesome.
it would be awesome. And then there could be tennis ball cannons.
Yes. And then he could run with the bat, defending himself from the tennis balls as he went, and maybe get
Yeah.
additional for each ball that he hit.
All right. I'm liking this league we're developing.
Yeah, me too. So,
Now,
listeners, if you want to have this league, right, we'll see what we can do.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Now, there's another one where they are playing what seems to be normal baseball, but according to Calvin, the bases are too darn far apart. And Hobbs is like, nah, you're just a big sissy, because Calvin has no chance of making it around the bases in time.
Mm-hmm.
There's another where Hobbs hits the ball really far, and Calvin's like, well, there goes the game. And so he's chasing down the ball, but kind of half-heartedly, just giving up hope. And then he hears Hobbs say, I haven't started around the bases yet. And so Calvin's like, what? And Hobbs is
Like, oh,
taunting him, I'm a
I'm,
little inchworm going an inch at a time. It's like, oops, I better tie my shoe when he's not even wearing shoes and
yeah,
all
he
this
still
stuff.
mimes doing it though.
Yeah. So Calvin is charging in as fast as he can and almost gets him. He's like on fire in the illustration almost as he's coming to Hobbs, and Hobbs barely touches the plate. Too late. I made a home run. And then in the last panel, they're all beat up.
Yeah, I believe like Hobbs is getting sewn up and Calvin is getting bandages or something from his mom. And yeah, the aftermath leads to a lot of fighting and injuries. We don't see it, but we know that's what happened after that.
Yeah, stitches for you, or stitches for Hobbs, bandages for you. What on earth have you been doing? Sort of a thing.
Yeah, which, I can kind of see Calvin's point here. Like Hobbs really lays on the taunting thick on this one.
Yeah, he kind of had it coming. Well, and I don't know if it was so much a fight as it was Calvin was running so fast to try to get Hobbs that he just plows into him so hard that they're all beat up. There could
That
have been a fight. Could be
Yeah,
both
or it could
things.
be both. Yeah, there certainly would have been an impact there, but I
Yeah.
feel
Yeah.
like there was a fight after this.
I wouldn't be surprised. Now, the one version of baseball that Calvin presumably wins consistently is when they use a tennis ball. He smacks the ball so hard that, or I guess the ball is so elastic that it goes so far Hobbs can't get to him in time. Too late, I made another home run, and Hobbs says, I'm quitting if we don't stop using this tennis ball.
Yeah, and this is kind of like the playing it straight version of the one we were just talking about. Because here it's not like Calvin's doing it for effect, but he just casually walks around the bases while Hobbs is furiously trying to get back.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, he's doing it for real though, not just to
Yeah, he's not
taunt
taunting
him.
Hobbs. He's just like, well, I'm in no hurry.
Yeah. But did you ever do that as a kid? Use a tennis ball
Oh,
with your
all the
baseball?
time. We
Go
weren't
ahead.
allowed to use a baseball in our backyard because, it's hard and could break a window and blah, blah, blah. So we always used a tennis ball.
Oh, okay.
And that's just like how you play baseball, at least in the backyard, from my perspective.
That's fair. Yeah, I think it's kind of similar to the, the low down basket in basketball, like we were talking about. Man, you could
Mhm.
really be a good slugger when you use a tennis ball with a baseball bat.
Yeah. Yeah, we would go to the park sometimes if we wanted to use a real baseball, but in the backyard, it was always a tennis ball. Yeah.
Makes sense.
Speaking of ways to play backyard baseball, there's a strip where they are talking about ghost runners. So Calvin gets a hit and he says, "Okay, so I have a ghost runner on first now, and my ghosts who were on first and second are now on second and third, right?" Which totally reasonable. That's how you do two-man baseball in the backyard. You
Unless
yeah, unless yeah, Calvin says that and Hobbs says, "Nope, they're both out." What? Out? Well, yeah, my ghost outfielder tagged your ghost running to third and then threw to my ghost second baseman. It was a brilliant double play. Well, and then they have this whole argument. I can't remember exactly the order, but Calvin or Hobbs's ghost outfield run in. Oh yeah, because his ghost on first stole home, so his Hobbs's ghosts beat the tobacco juice out of him, and so then the ghost umpire suspends all of Hobbs's ghosts for eternity.
yeah, well, which is
Well,
a very harsh penalty.
yeah, that is pretty harsh. And well, the ghost crowd supports me. They're booing you, and if my ghosts don't play, I don't play.
Yeah. Yeah, their booing you line just really, I think that's where we hand the victory to Hobbs in this one. It's like, all right.
Yeah, yeah, and that's again where Calvin observes we really need some more kids in this neighborhood or something like that.
Yeah, although as much as he says that, he doesn't necessarily really want that when we come down to it, which we'll talk about in a little bit.
Yeah, that's true. We'll come to that in a sec. But real quick before we get there, there are a couple others where they're playing sort of normal baseball. One, Hobbs pitches the ball too high and they argue about it. And then at the end, they decide Calvin should just stand on a ladder, which seems kind of dangerous to me, but hey, it's a comic strip.
Yeah, and one thing I like about this is one of the completely silent strips where it's just the art carries it the whole time, but again,
Yep.
it's so evocative. You know exactly what they're saying and see everything. Like, the whole argument that devolves from this, and I love too, like after the inevitable like dust kicking and fighting, then they kind of stop and we get this just sort of pensive expression, and then we get him on the ladder. So
Yeah.
yeah, I always
And
appreciated that one.
yeah, it's a good one. And there's another one like it where this one's not silent. Calvin says, "Strike, that was 4 feet above my head. Your pitch was way too high." "No, it wasn't too high. You're just too short." "Well, you're just too ugly." "Well, you're just too stupid." and they're doing something during all this that is the only part of baseball they really like. And what is that?
That is kicking dust.
Correct. Kicking dust is the only part of baseball they really like. That's what it's all about.
Yeah, kicking dust at the other guy.
Now, a couple more before we get to the one that connects us to Calvinball. There's a couple instances where they play in the house. So there's one that's just a single panel and the furniture is just a mess. And Calvin says, "Do you think God lets you plea bargain?" And Hobbes says, "I'd worry more about your mom." And then there's another one where he wasn't playing baseball exactly, but mom says, "You were hitting rocks in the house? What on earth would make you do that?" Do you remember Calvin's response?
I think he suggests poor genetic material.
Yeah. And then he's up in his room. Bad guess. So, couple of playing baseball in the house, but one that I really like that is kind of starting to get us close to Calvinball again is a snow version of baseball. So there's a couple of instances of this. First of all, once Calvin remarks that it would be awesome if it snowed in summer, but then realizes, oh, but that would mean it would be hard to run when you're playing baseball. And he goes back and forth on some other stuff. And then at the end says, heck, I guess everything's okay the way it is. And Hobbs is like, "I'm glad you approve."
I
um,
think he says, "You're glad you approve." So it's
we're
like
glad. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
representative of all nature or like the order of the earth or something. So
Yeah. But then there's one where they actually try it. So Hobbs Hobbs throws the pitch, and Calvin is in his winter wear, and he swings the bat and destroys the snowball. And so Calvin says, "Do you want to call that a single or just give this up?" So they almost give up, but then they seem to realize that there is a way you could do this. So you hit the snowball and it gets destroyed, but then you get on a sled and start trying to make your way around some set of bases on that sled while the defender makes a new snowball and tries to knock you off the sled with it. And they call this speed sled based snowball.
Which again, another creative and fun looking idea. That seems like it would be pretty fun to try.
Yeah, I like it. So someone ought to put that league together too.
Yeah,
Now,
man.
there
Got
are,
a lot of amazing sports ideas.
I know, like we should contact ESPN or something when we're done here.
That's
But
true. They probably eat this up.
so wait, tell me more about the tennis ball cannons. Yeah. Um,
Yeah.
but now we're going to get to some versions of baseball that start to look an awful lot like Calvinball. So first, they refer to baseball as an intellectual sport. They're saying, this is a thinking man's game. You really have to consider strategy, especially the way we play. Right. The first person to discover 12th base gets a ghost point and one free get out of jail.
Yeah, which I
I like,
assume we're going to be get out of jail free card like for Monopoly, but maybe
yeah,
not.
yeah. And I like the idea of a ghost point. I think that's another clever version of a ghost. I don't know what it means, but I like it.
Yeah, which interesting fun fact. So you mentioned, ghost runners is what you do in backyard baseball. But did you know that they also have ghost runners sometimes in real baseball?
No, I did not know that. Tell me
Yeah,
more.
I didn't either until I think like maybe last season. So real recently, I think this is an overtime thing where like if a game has gone on a certain amount of time, then you start as if there's already a runner on second, to make the
Hmm.
game or the
What?
tiebreak go faster. But yeah, they call it a ghost runner. They didn't have an actual guy there.
Really?
Yeah. So that was that
I
was
thought they
my
just put
response.
someone on second.
That would
Weird.
make sense to me, but that doesn't seem like what they did. But either way, they called it a ghost runner. And when I heard the announcer say this, I was like, wait, what? Like
That's
this is
crazy.
yeah, this is the MLB. We have ghost runners. What
Why
we
do
do
you need
that?
a ghost run? You've got a whole team.
Yeah. So I thought that was very, very interesting and sort of funny. Like, wow, I never knew that ghost runners actually graduated from the backyard to be in the major leagues. That's incredible.
You just blew my mind. I had no. Okay, wow. I'm gonna have to read more about this later.
Yeah, like I said, I was shocked. I didn't know about this until very recently either.
There's got to be a recent development because, yeah,
Yeah,
that.
I feel like we would have heard about it at some time before now, if so. But yeah, I was just really surprised to hear that. I was like, wait,
Yeah, that's
what?
weird.
What'd you say? Ghost Runner?
Yeah. Okay. All right. Sure. Why not? So couple more Calvin ball adjacent versions of baseball. So there's one where Calvin's running along, calling out the numbers of the bases that he's touching. First base, okay, normal. Fifth, what? Ninth, 11th, 25th. Calvin's going for home, and he almost makes it, but Hobbs gets it. So, we're starting to see some pretty severe deviation from normal baseball here.
That's
And
true.
then
In
there's
fact, he
one.
even missed one base because it was the secret base.
Well, yeah, actually a separate strip because there's one where
Oh, I
Calvin makes the home run, and Hobbs is like, "No, you didn't touch all the bases. You didn't touch seventh base." Yes, I did. I touched the rain barrel or whatever. And no, that's 12th base. I thought 12th base was the garage. No, that's 23rd. You touched them all out of order, and you still didn't touch the secret base. The secret base? What's that? I can't tell you. It's a secret.
that's right. And then I think when he tags him out, he's like, "You're out. Give me $1."
Yes. And Calvin's like, I can't believe this moronic sport is our national pastime. So those are all very Calvin Ball-esque, but the one that really definitively connects baseball to Calvin Ball is the one you mentioned, the recess baseball story arc. So the idea here is everyone has the opportunity to sign up to play baseball at recess if they would like, but Calvin is the only boy who doesn't. So he's the only boy on a playground full of girls at recess. He's in Cootie Central.
Right. But interestingly, aside from that initial horror of being in Cootie Central and in a playground surrounded by girls, he actually seems to enjoy it, or at least enjoys just playing with Susie. Like we see them just on the teeter totter
Mm-hmm.
having a conversation about how he doesn't really like baseball or organized sports. And he seems to, even though he's hanging out with a slimy girl, he seems to really enjoy it.
Yeah, and he gives a line that I like that he says something like, if he wants people telling him what to do all day, he figures he'll join the military and at least get paid.
Yeah. I think another thing about this strip that it didn't really occur to me until almost just now, but as much as Calvin complains about girls, they really don't do anything to bother him, or at least not without retaliation. Not sometimes the retaliation Susie might, but like
Yeah.
the girls don't seem to bother him. It's when people make his life miserable, it's always other boys who are doing this.
Yeah, usually Mo, at least at
Mhm.
school. And so, speaking of which, Mo teases Calvin about not having signed up for baseball. He's like, look at the little sissy who didn't sign up for baseball. Oh, show me your Barbie doll, you little sissy wimp. And Calvin's like, I'm not a wimp, Mo. In fact, I was going to the office to sign up for baseball right now. And then he says, then again, if I'm not a wimp, why am I taking the path of least resistance?
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, this is the kind of thing I mean. So in a second, we'll see some of the other boys being unkind to him too. But
Yeah,
it's really always the boys that are giving him trouble. The girls either ignore him or he actually has fun with them, like Susie. And
yeah.
I think this too is the only time we really see Mo engaging in what we might call like emotional bullying instead of just being
Mm,
violent or thuggish. I mean, you could maybe say there's also the one where he says Calvin's like playing with his fellow bugs because he's, oh, look at Shorty playing with his fellow bugs or whatever. But even that is still like based on physical size and sort of, domination and bullying of that sort.
yeah,
Yeah, so yeah, this one stands out for this reason too. This is the only time I really think of we see Mo like, just being like, "Oh yeah, you're a sissy, you're playing with dolls," instead of like, actually pushing him down or hitting him or something.
right. Yeah. We'll probably talk about Mo some more later, but I like that Watterson characterized Mo as every bully that he's ever known and that he thinks they spawn on damp locker room floors.
That seems reasonable.
Yeah. So anyway, Calvin signs up for baseball and his dad helps him practice, takes him outside and hits him some balls to field, and one of the grounders bounces up and hits him in the nose and gives him a nosebleed.
I think it's the first one he hits to him, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, and then of course, his dad is kind of on board with this because, oh yeah, playing sports builds character. This is great. But then
Yeah.
because this happens, we get one of my all-time favorite lines in the strip where Calvin's in after getting hit in the face with the ball, his nose is bleeding, and goes, "All my character is dripping out my nose."
Yeah, I like that he associates that with character. That's great.
Oh yeah, and I just love that even kind of injured from this, he still has the wherewithal to be sarcastic about his dad's insistence on building character.
Yes, absolutely. So, that obviously doesn't go well, but he eventually takes care of that. But he's talking to Hobbs about, I like this. This is what you were kind of alluding to before about do we really need more players? Because he says, I like playing with just you because we get to do all the things. We get to bat and pitch and hit and field and all this stuff. It's boring playing it the real way. And Hobbs says, do you even know how to play the real way? And Calvin says, see, that's another problem. Suppose they make me a halfback. Can I tackle the shortstop or not? So there's the allusion to football in this.
Yeah, so
Um,
probably no allusion to basketball in that one.
yeah, I don't think so. But so he finally gets to his team. He talks to his coach, Mr. Lockjaw, who tells him to go play left field. And Calvin's like, left field. Yes,
Left
let's see. I
field.
know that. That's that way, play deep left field. So Calvin's out there in deep left field, so deep that it's in this tall grass. And then he's like, what's everyone doing? Are people switching teams? The guys who were at bat are now out here. Well, I guess someone would tell me if I was supposed to be doing anything different. And then ultimately he catches a fly ball, but it turns out it was hit by his team because they were now at bat and he didn't realize this. So his team, like you say, the boys get all mad at him and are yelling at him, can I hit him with the bat, coach? And let's kick him off the team. And so he can't seem to win no matter what he does. He quits, and the coach is like, all right, goodbye, quitter. Like, there's just no winning here.
Yeah, and I think other than the times where Hobbs is missing, like when he, in the break-in arc when he can't find him,
Mm-hmm.
that, or like when the dog carries him away. And I think other than those times, this is probably the sorriest I ever feel for Calvin.
Yeah, it's really rough on him.
Yeah, I mean, and everyone's just so mean. It's like, this is this is a 6-year-old boy and he didn't really want to do it, and then he's trying, and everyone just ignores him until it's time to blame him. So
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, I just felt
Very
bad for Calvin in this one.
Yeah, very unfair. My injustice alarm is just going off with this whole arc. But
Definitely.
in the last strip of the arc, here's where we finally get to the goal of this episode. So Hobbs asks Calvin what he wants to do. It's the weekend now, and Calvin says anything but play an organized sport. And so Hobbs suggests they play Calvinball. No sport is less organized than Calvinball. And so that's the first time that we actually get the phrase Calvinball. You could argue that stuff that we see Calvin and Hobbs doing before this strip is kind of like Calvinball, but this is the first time that word is actually used. So
Which is
that's
kind of funny because, um, I was thinking about this, and I guess, now having read all the strips several times, I don't always remember the order. So when I think about that one, I tend to think of it as like, oh yeah, Calvin ball is this established thing. So it makes it, oh yeah, nothing's less organized than that. But it's interesting that, like you're saying, that actually is the origin of the phrase Calvin ball.
yeah. And I mean, obviously they already know what it is. So this isn't the first time they've played Calvinball, but it's the first time the reader learns of it.
Yeah. It's just weird in retrospect thinking of that.
Yeah, and a few strips later, we get one of the Calvinball strips where they're playing, and we kind of see how the rules work, but or lack thereof, I guess. But we finally made it, listeners. We've made it to Calvinball. That's our goal. So, quiz time, Indy. How many strips do
Yay,
you
made it to
think?
Calvin ball. Oh, I'm sorry, I was cheering. Go ahead.
Yeah, how many strips do you think there are where they actually play Calvinball?
All right. So I don't I don't know. Again, we've talked about how the tendency to overestimate things or whatever, but I'm gonna guess 18.
Oh, you were very close. All right, so
Really?
by my count, there are 14 strips where they play Calvinball.
Okay.
Now,
Well, I still overestimated it. Wow.
but not by much. That was a real good guess. So
Thank you.
now, several of those are the Rosalind story arc, where they're playing Calvinball across several strips in that arc. But they're individual strips. So
Okay.
14 strips that I counted where they're definitely playing Calvinball or mentioning it. Now, as a quick side note, before we get into how you play Calvinball and everything, Calvinball has made its way into popular culture and other references. For instance, there have apparently been Calvinball leagues on college campuses and stuff. I'm not really sure how that works because, by its very nature, I don't know how you can have rankings and stuff in Calvinball, but I guess
Yeah,
someone has
that's
attempted
hard
it.
to pull off. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you can't have a referee. You specifically don't. So I don't know how this works, but sure. Okay. But also interestingly, Calvin Ball has been referred to in a dissenting Supreme Court opinion.
Yeah, that's wild. So I did not realize that until you brought it up. And so here's what I'm going to guess was the context for this, but you can tell me whether this is right or not. So
Okay.
so here's what I'm thinking. Maybe the majority opinion, the dissenting opinion was criticizing it for being like unprincipled or ad hoc in some way. And they're saying, oh, this is just like making up things like Calvin ball. Was it something like that?
That's exactly it. So this
Wow.
is actually
Okay.
pretty recent. This was just in August of 2025.
Oh, okay.
And so the dissenting justice said, this is Calvin Ball jurisprudence with a twist. Calvin Ball has only one rule. There are no fixed rules. We seem to have two. That one and this administration always wins. So,
Wow.
kind of a scathing rebuke using Calvin Ball, which I just find fascinating.
That is very impressive, actually. So yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So that did make sense. Like the what I was thinking was probably the use for it, but that's fascinating. I did not know that till you brought it up.
Yeah, crazy. So I guess congratulations, Bill Watterson. You got something in a Supreme Court opinion.
So yeah, that is pretty cool. I mean, maybe it's a bad thing since that was a dissenting opinion and it sounded like maybe the original decision wasn't great, but still cool that he got something in the Supreme Court record there.
Well, yeah, I don't know how you would work Calvin Ball in if it was like, yes, and I am in favor of this. I think this is the right path forward. So
Yeah, that's How could we do that? Maybe if it was something like maybe like, oh, this will allow the this will allow our cures for diseases to be like Calvinball. Anything we think of can be made manifest or something. I don't know.
That
That's a little abstract and metaphorical, but maybe it would work.
that would be some amazing medicine.
That's true. Yeah, I mean that's boy, that I hope we get to that.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're
All
right.
right, but
It does work better as a criticism.
yeah. So let's talk about Calvin Ball. How do you play Calvin Ball? What are the rules? And there actually are at least a few rules. I can think of three. Indy, what rules can you think of?
Okay, so I also thought of three. I haven't looked at what yours were, so we can see if they're the same. But then it occurred to me you could argue there's a fourth one.
Okay.
Okay, so I'll go through the three I originally thought of, and then the other one I thought you might count. So one is it's whatever we make up is
Hmm.
one thing. Okay, there's you can't play the same way twice,
Right.
and that you have to declare your rules or your plays or whatever you want to call that. So, for
Right.
instance, like when we talk about, I didn't see you touch the opposite pole, you have to declare, I declared it oppositely, that kind of thing. So, I think
Yeah.
those make sense. And then I might add a fourth one, which is something like you wear a mask or nobody can question the masks.
Yeah. So I didn't actually come up with the you have to declare it. So I will agree
Okay.
though. I think there are actually four rules.
All right.
But yeah, when you play Calvin Ball, you wear a mask, and kind of as part of that rule, no one's allowed to question the masks.
Yeah. Okay.
So
All
yeah,
right.
okay,
Yeah, so we were on the same wavelength there. I think we've identified the core rules of Calvinball.
yeah. But outside of that, whatever you make up, that's how you play Calvin Ball. So, in fact, in the opening ceremony song that we did our renditions of last episode, Calvin says that other games are bad in part because you got to keep score. So it's interesting that he says that because there is kind of an arcane scorekeeping system in Calvin Ball. So what scores can you think of in Calvin Ball?
Okay. So I think one is like they're asking what the score is. It's like oogie to boogie, and then maybe Calvin says, "I already had oogie." I think
Yep,
I think is one. Then the other one I want to say is like Z to Q. Is that
you're
right?
close. The
Okay.
score is still Q to 12,
Q to 12. Okay. All right. So
which
the
actually
oogie.
could be a score. You
What's
you
that?
could because well in some systems you use letters as numbers if you're not using base 10. So Q to 12 could be an actual score, but I
Okay.
don't think it is in this case.
Probably not. So I was thinking just now though. So maybe even though you do keep score in Calvin Ball sometimes, maybe you don't have to, and so we could still say,
Yeah.
well, other games are bad because you gotta keep score, but in Calvin Ball, maybe it's optional, or you do sometimes, or you don't other times, or something.
Yeah, that's reasonable. It's like whose line is it anyway? The points don't matter. You
Yes.
have them, but it doesn't matter. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I was pretty sure there was Q and what I forgot the other one though. So it was 12, not Z. It sounds like.
Yeah. Now, Calvin ball involves elements of several of the other sports that we've talked about already. So often, as we said, the ball is a volleyball, although at least once it seems to be a soccer ball. They use the wickets, which specifically Calvin refers to as time fracture wickets. I don't know what that means, but it sounds awesome.
Well, I was
And
thinking about this too, though. So isn't that's part of the Rosalind strip, right? He says,
uh-huh.
"Get out the time fracture." Okay, so then there is the point in that where they have to move and talk in slow motion.
Oh,
So
that's
maybe the
true.
time fracture wickets affect that somehow.
Yeah, maybe that's how he was in. Well, no, he said he has the Calvin ball, so everyone has to talk slowly or go in slow motion.
Well, that's true.
So
It
I
was
guess
a
having the Calvin ball activated the time fracture wickets or something.
that must be it.
And then also one of the wickets is called the 30-yard base wicket at least once because Calvin says, new rule, new rule. If you don't touch the 30-yard base wicket, you have to hop on one foot. So there's that. We can use badminton rackets. We can use stick horses, croquet mallets, and flags come up a lot. Now,
And in one
speaking
case,
of
there
flags,
was a bag because Hobbs was in a bag flag zone.
that's true. Yeah. So bags and flags. And do you remember what Calvin says when he steals Hobbs's flag?
Okay, so I feel like I remember most of it. I think there's part I'm leaving out. So it's something like Ollie Wally something ump bump fizz.
Yeah, you're real close. It's Ollie Wally Pollywoggy Bump Fizz.
Pollywoggy bump. Okay.
Yeah, the first time I read that, I just got the giggles and I couldn't stop laughing for like 10 minutes. It was that one just really got me. And
That's
so
a
I
good
made the
one.
point to memorize it.
Did you ever have a phrase like that for anything you played when you were younger?
Well, in hide and seek, there's Ollie Ollie Oxenfree, where
Yeah.
my understanding is you've given up, so everyone come on out.
Okay. Is that, yeah, I remember that from hide and seek too. So I always thought maybe this was kind of a takeoff on that.
Yeah, I could see that. But yeah, I love that. Ollie Wally Pollywoggy Ump Bump Fizz. Hey. um, but that's also the one where Hobbs tags Calvin with the Calvin ball, so he has to sing the "I'm Very Sorry" song, which we did our renditions of in the last episode. So if you
Yeah.
want to hear those, you can go back to that. And then, so that was one made up rule. You know, I stole your flag. Well, I touched you with the Calvin ball, so you have to sing the song. And so in that we get some rules, and there are other made up rules that we hear in Calvin and Hobbes. For instance, you could find yourself in the invisible sector, a
Right. You
vortex spot.
can't see me because it's invisible.
Right, yeah, and you can't see when you're in it because everything is invisible to you. And
That's right.
there's a vortex spot which makes you have to spin around and fall down. But if you're in the boomerang zone, then it could go back to the person who said you were in the vortex spot. There's an opposite pole which you declare oppositely by not declaring it. No song zone, stuff like that.
I forgot
Uh,
about the no song zone.
yeah, that's why Hobbs had to have touched the opposite pole so that it becomes a song zone.
I see. Okay. That makes
Yeah.
sense.
So there's the perimeter of wisdom that Rosalind stumbles into, the corollary zone that lets Calvin throw the water balloon at her, the pernicious poem place, the bag flag zone. Pretty much, I mean, like we said, anything you make up. So, you know, this is just the ones we get in Calvin and Hobbes, but you can come up with whatever you want.
Yeah. And Calvin is pretty good at this. There's a lot of creative stuff he comes up with.
Yeah, well, and Hobbes, don't play Calvinball with Hobbes.
Well, that's
Now,
true. Yeah, Hobbs is really good.
yeah. Now, I tried to play Calvinball once with my friend. And so we went out in the field and we had, I don't know, some sort of ball. And we were like, okay, so um, do you have any ideas? It was really hard. Listeners, have you ever tried to play Calvinball? It's hard.
Yeah, I almost wonder if this would be easier if it just kind of naturally evolved out of something else in the way that we've seen that happen with Calvin and Hobbes sometimes from other sports. Like if you
Yeah,
have one thing like, let's do this now and whatever, with that, you could just iterate on that, I suppose.
yeah,
So I do.
yeah.
So what we could do was have, since we're talking about Calvin ball and lesser sports, we could have some sports themes, Calvin and Hobbes trivia.
All right, let's do that. I like it.
Okay, so I've got, I think, at least two questions that I can think of. I don't know. So I'll ask one, and then if you have a trivia question, we'll do that, and then we can go back and forth maybe if you like.
All right, and it's good because at least I am not prepared here. I don't have any in mind, so I'm going to at least have to channel some Calvinball by coming up with it on the spot.
Yeah, I was gonna say, so this can be kind of like our version of virtual Calvin ball. So obviously we're not throwing a ball or anything, but yeah, we'll
Yeah.
use the spirit of Calvin ball to come up with some of these.
Okay. All right.
All right, so we talked about Calvin and Hobbes playing football on several occasions,
Uh-huh.
but my question is, when and for what reason does Calvin actually wear a football helmet?
Okay. So I think there's actually a couple of cases where he does this, and I think it's both. Well, I can't remember if there's two or not, but there's one where he's wearing like some pillows and a football helmet to protect himself from Hobbs pouncing.
Right. And you remember what
Oh,
his mother thinks when this happens?
yeah, she says that the psychology books were such a waste of money.
Yeah.
There's
Oh,
another
God,
one.
psychology book for such a waste of money.
There's another one. Okay, maybe I'll turn this into my trivia question. It's not exactly sports, but I can't remember if he has a helmet on, but he's got pillows strapped to himself again, and he's asking his mom about something. I hope this is a fair question. Can you remember what he? We'll put it this way. What are they out of?
Yes. So actually, that was going to be the follow up to this one because remember I said like when and for what reason. So there are actually two. So the first one is like you said, is because Hobbs keeps pouncing on him. So now he's creeping through the house with the pillows tied to him and the football helmet. And then you're right, in this other one, he also has the pillows and the football helmet. And he says something like, "Mom, can you go to the store? Why? We seem to be out of gunpowder."
Yeah,
Yeah, so it seems like the plan was to like absorb the impact of a cannonball, I think.
or something. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and then of course it ends with him up in his room, presumably being punished. Like, geez, I didn't even do it yet.
yeah,
Yeah, okay,
yeah.
so
Okay,
yeah, those are the two I could think of where he actually wore a football helmet, and like you pointed out, he also has pillows tied to his front and back.
right.
Yeah,
Okay,
but it
okay.
seems
So
like
since
he
you already
never
knew that one, let
sure.
me let, let me see if I can think of a another sports trivia question.
Yeah.
So
And while you come up with it, I'll just point out it's interesting to me too that he has this football helmet that he wears sometimes, but he never actually wears it when they're playing football.
that's true. Yeah. Okay, let's see. I don't know how good these trivia questions are going to be because I'm just coming up with them on the spot. But what is Calvin's observation about croquet?
All right, so I think this is kind of a throwaway gag preceding one of the strips we talked about before. Is that correct?
Yeah,
Okay, so I think I think it's Hobbes that says the first thing. It could be Calvin, but
yeah,
it's something like croquet is a gentleman's game, and then Calvin's kind of holding the mallet, kind of like you would a sledgehammer, and he says, "Well, I find that hard to believe because, I've played it before, and the temptation to misuse these things is really strong, or something like that."
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, which again, that's fair. Like that's a nice big old hammer you could use to whack things.
Oh,
So
absolutely. Yeah.
yeah, so I don't think I ever did anything like that when I was a kid. I think we always just played croquet the right way, but I can certainly see where Cal was coming from.
I could imagine a kid doing that for sure.
Oh yeah, definitely. All right, let's see. Now, this is another football related question. What is Calvin's favorite football team?
Calvin's favorite football team. Oh my gosh, that's a deep cut.
This is a deep.
Okay. Uh, no, you got me. I don't know that one.
All right, so here's what I'm going to say. We can debate whether this is a fair question or not. So I'll say I can't actually substantiate this with the strip. So it's not like Calvin's like, oh, I'm going to watch blah, blah, blah. But I think I can make a good case for what his favorite football team is using the strip.
Okay. Okay.
All right. So we talked about how Calvin and Hobbes most likely takes place in Chagrin Falls, Ohio.
Sure.
And we know Calvin loves tigers. So
Okay.
I'm going to say Calvin's favorite football team is the Cincinnati Bengals.
Okay. I could, yeah, yeah. I got that makes sense. Now there's also are the Detroit Tigers a football team? I'm
No,
revealing
that's a
my sports
baseball
ignorance.
team.
That's baseball. Okay. All right. So yeah, Cincinnati Bengals got to be then. Yeah.
Yeah, something an Ohio team and their mascot is a type of tiger. I'm like, I think that's a lock. We're gonna call
Oh
that.
yeah, yeah. It would
I
have to
think,
be. Yeah.
yeah, I'm saying that's Calvin's favorite football team.
Yeah. I don't think we have it confirmed anywhere in the strip, but what else could it be? So
Yeah. So like I
yeah.
said, that's we can debate whether that's a totally fair question, but maybe it's in the spirit of Calvinball. So I think based on the strip, I think that's a reasonable answer to that question.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. That's pretty good.
Thank you.
All right. Let's see. Maybe I'll try for one more. Oh man, this is hard. Ooh, we're gonna be cutting out some pauses on this episode. Uh,
Now, I will say I had thought of those ahead of time, so I had a little
yeah,
bit
yeah,
of advantage here. So
right. No, but I got to come up with at least one more. Let's see.
I did just think of one other that I could do if you want.
Okay, yeah, go for it.
All right. So, what sport does Calvin try on the assumption or the belief that there could be a career in it?
Well, okay, there's one where he's doing baseball and he's having a hard time with it, and then he tells dad, or he asks dad something like, "Can you make a living playing silly games?" And Dad says, "Actually, you can be among the most overpaid people on the planet." And so then he's back out trying to throw the ball to himself and hit it again.
Right, so there is that. So that's not the one I was thinking of, but that's true. There's one where he and Hobbs try something like this isn't a sport that exists now, but Calvin thinks there could be a career in this one they're kind of
Oh,
making up.
is it the one where he's like spitting? And boy, they sure go farther when you make them right.
Oh, no, so I know which one you're talking about. I don't think he talks about that as a career. I
No, no,
think
he doesn't talk about it as a career, does he? Ah, give me another clue.
um let's see. So I guess we can say this is kind of a two-person sport, or it requires two people to accomplish the primary activity of this sport. I don't know if that's
Hmm.
a clue or like a really weird. I'm trying to think of how to phrase that.
Yeah, I feel like I'm almost there, but I don't quite have it. So I think I'm gonna have to give up on this one.
Okay, and again, it was hard to kind of phrase how to ask this one, but there's one strip where Hobbs grabs Calvin, spins around and around, and tosses him, and then at the
Oh
end,
yeah,
are you sure there's a career to be had as a human discus?
right. Yes. Okay, got it. Speaking of that, here's one.
Okay.
There's another. So discus is an Olympic sport. There's another reference to the Olympics in Calvin and Hobbes. Do you know what that one is?
Ooh, let's see. Yeah. So I think I might be getting some of the details wrong, but I think it's like his Calvin's mom wants him to go outside, and you see him kind of sailing out the door, and then he says something like, "Mom lettered in shot put in college" or something.
That is a good one. That's not the one I was thinking of, but yeah, yeah, shot put
Okay.
is referred to.
All right. So let me see if I can think of another one. There's the one where I don't think they talk about a sport there though. Because I was thinking when his mom has to like chase him to make him go to school, and then she clears.
Hmm. Clears
I
the
don't.
hedge.
Yeah, I don't think there's a reference to a specific like Olympic event in that.
Yeah. So it's not a reference to an Olympic event. It's just a reference to the Olympics, if that helps.
The Olympics. I'm not sure. I think I give up.
All right. So Calvin is running and then does a some sort of double flip or something into a pile of leaves. And then
Ah,
as he's crawling out, he says there really ought to be a fall Olympics.
that's right. Yeah. All right. Good question. I remember that now.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think for the sake of my sanity, we probably ought to call it there. But listeners, this has been our Calvinball adjacent game, and I believe the score to this wound up being like a tyrannosaur to a rubber duck or something.
I already
So,
had rubber duck.
oh, sorry, my mistake. But listeners, thank you for tuning in. As always, this has been a delight. This is halfway through the podcast now, which is just mind blowing. If you have
Really
any
is.
thoughts you would like to share about sports or Calvin Ball or any past episodes, we would love to hear from you. Our email address, as always, is magiccandh@proton.me. So that's magiccandh@proton.me. We'd love to hear from you. You could also leave us a review. That would be awesome. You could give us a rating. Any interaction we can get with you is fantastic. We always love to hear from you.
Yes. And on that note, remember there are no ads, and this podcast is completely free. So it's all just about interaction and having fun talking about this amazing strip, whether it means Calvin Ball or trivia or what have you. So, like we always say, we would love to have you come along and celebrate it with us.
Yes, please come along and let's go exploring. You've been listening to The Magic of Calvin and Hobbes, a fan celebration. We'll be releasing 40 episodes all throughout the year, from November 18th, 2025 to November 18th, 2026, to celebrate the 40th anniversary. Our intro and outro music is Tchaikovsky's 1812 Overture, referenced in the Calvin and Hobbes strip published on October 8, 1986. This rendition was performed by the Skidmore College Orchestra and made available under a Creative Commons license on museopen.com. We hope you'll join us next episode for more fun.